journey is with the Nova Scotia Fisheries and Aquaculture, and Nathaniel Findell and Carla Buchan will be the presenters, and they're going to be talking about licensing, oversight, and enforcement. And just on behalf of the PAC, I'd like to thank you in advance for joining us online this afternoon and having a discussion, taking some questions. So there's an hour allotted for the presentation, because they're obviously the licensing authority and oversight enforcement related to that as well. And we've got a half hour for questions after that. So welcome.
Thank you very much, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to come and present on our licensing and leasing process and the regulatory framework. And we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Yeah, and I'll reiterate what Carla just said. Appreciate you reaching out and taking the time and learning about land-based aquaculture and what that could mean for your municipality.
Right. Oh. So do you have a presentation to start off, or?
Yep. No, I've got a presentation I'll provide. So I can share my screen here.
Oh, please do.
Hopefully that's working there.
Yes, it is. Thank you.
All right.
Okay. If you want to start, that'd be great.
Perfect. So yeah, my name is Nathaniel Findell, and I'm the manager of aquaculture development and marine plants harvesting for the province. I'm based out of Shelburne, Nova Scotia, and we cover aquaculture across the province. I'll get into a little bit of that in a second here, but again, want to thank you for taking the time, inviting us here. I believe the intent is you're looking at some rezoning language by the Planning and Advisory Committee specific to aquaculture, and determining, well, gaining some insight into the industry and what that could mean for that language and what you want to pursue within the municipality of Yarmouth. So I'm going to present, what is occurring with aquaculture in Nova Scotia to you today, the types of land-based facilities in Nova Scotia, our regulatory framework, and the process for obtaining a license or for a land-based facility, and then get into some regulation and management of the industry if applicants are successful in obtaining new applications, or what it is currently occurring within the province right now. So to give you a bit of an insight to the department, we are the Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture. So under Minister Craig, his portfolio encompasses marine services, our inland fisheries division, as well as the aquaculture division. So 3 different departments within fisheries and aquaculture, but I'll speak specifically to aquaculture itself. And you can see we have 3 sections within the aquaculture division. That would be the licensing and leasing section, which is composed of licensing coordinators that manage the administrative side of the licensing and leasing of aquaculture. Then you have the aquaculture development section. That's my section. We have essentially a suite of aquaculture advisors and biologists specific to aquaculture and marine plants, as well as the GIS information systems and aquaculture planning officer that develop all the different types of maps and do planning within the division, as well as, and I guess from my division's perspective, we work with current industry, new applicants, as well as other government agencies, stakeholders, and from across the province to deal with anything aquaculture. And that's why, I guess, one reason why I'm here speaking with you today, to give you some insight into the industry. We develop, policies and provide information to support the development of policies or regulations from the department's perspective. We work with the other sections as well on any policy related pieces or regulatory aspects of that are related to their sections specifically, but all supported through the different regs and acts. So that's sort of the aquaculture development section. Then you have aquaculture operations, and they're more focused on what is occurring at farms. That composes of a number of aquaculture biologists and management specialists, and that encompasses a number of programs specific to the farm operations and policy pieces like farm management plans and environmental monitoring or containment management, and some specifics to fish health. But then they work closely with our aquatic animal health group. That consists of aquatic animal health veterinarians, fish biologists, and animal health coordinators that are really focused on the husbandry of animals in the farms and what is occurring on the farms from an aquatic animal health perspective. So that's just a bit of a breakdown of the department itself, the different divisions, and how that you'll see how different sections play into the oversight of the industry itself. So aquaculture in Nova Scotia, just to give you a bit of an idea of what is currently occurring as aquaculture as a whole across the province. So for land-based, there's essentially 35 issued licensed facilities within the province. For finfish, we have 32 marine finfish sites within the province. There's 162 shellfish sites, and then we have 10 experimental sites. So this is sort of how we sort of bucket, I guess, the different types of licenses or leases within the province. And then it gets broken down further from there. But for experimental, there's 2 finfish and then 8 shellfish. And those are in the marine environment. And as you can see on my top line there, we currently have licenses that would have 87 different species throughout all of our licenses. So that's incorporating all 4 different buckets there in one form or another. But they essentially we have a license within the province that has up to 87 species. Now that's not 87 on one. It's one license might be for one species, another might have 5. Licenses can have multiple species on them. Growers can grow multiple species. But I'd say that the commercial production is mainly focused around the ones I've sort of highlighted there on the bottom left. So that's oysters, eels, halibut, salmon, cohawk, scallops, mussels, trout, kelp, another form of scallop, Irish moss, lumpfish, rainbow trout, and softshell clams. But again, the industry is quite diverse and across the varying culture techniques. So just to give you a snapshot of, there is a significant amount of species that are or can be farmed within the province. So just a little historical stats for you. So we break it down into, again, finfish, shellfish, and then other. And that's across the province, all forms of culture techniques, but mainly through those for the varying, I guess, species classes there. So you can see the numbers were pretty steady from 2011 into 2016. And then from there, took essentially a bit of a jump up and sort of leveled out a bit more. But the value is on the right at about 90 million, we'll say, this year or in 2020. And that's at a production amount of about 13 million kilograms. So that varies across species and culture type, but that's essentially where we're at from the province's perspective in value and production. Now, this is just a snapshot of our web mapping tool. You can go onto our website to see where that is being conducted around the province. So I've got the link there. Obviously, just you can enter that into the browser. I'll have that at the end of the presentation as well with a couple other resources. But this is there's an interactive tool online where you can zoom in to see what is currently being conducted in and around the province. And there's different types of culture or proposed sites and where that is being done. So you can see it is vast across the province and in different areas. And The blue ones you can see, those are shellfish sites, green ones finfish, and the gray ones are land-based. So I did filter that out, which you can on the web mapping tool as well. And these are the different land-based facilities in and around the province of Nova Scotia. We've got a couple proposed land-based facilities. There's a number of issued ones, and then yellow ones that are in the middle. Those are our provincial fish hatcheries within the province as well. Then I thought, since I'm presenting to Yarmouth, I'd take a snapshot and zoom in on Yarmouth to just show what is currently occurring in your area. So you can see there's essentially 5 leases, I believe, here. These blue shellfish leases. They look like they may be connected, but the 3 that are in Yarmouth Harbour there and moving out of the harbour there's 4 separate leases there, and then there's one over to the right, and those are, I believe, softshell clam leases. You can click on a lease in the interactive map. It'll tell you who owns the lease and what species they're actually licensed for. And then you can see, well, your neighboring municipality there, the municipality of Argyle, and they've got some shellfish leases and finfish leases over there as well. And you can also see, obviously, you have one issued land-based facility. Oh, sorry, in your municipality as well, which I believe is in that's your business park area. So what are the types of facilities that we have in Nova Scotia? And they do range. They range in size and scale and technologies. So when we refer to, what land-based, we do deem it at we refer to it as a land-based facility. You can start breaking it down to the types of systems. There's flows through, there's recirculating, there's hybrids. We also have U-fish facilities. So we look at it all as land-based, and they do vary. You can see different pictures and of the different types of tanks you have. In some cases, it's ponds. That picture in the pond is actually a man-made dug pond that would be essentially a flow-through system. But it also has some cages within it. Then we have on the left, that is another flow-through system. There's tank systems. So it does definitely range in what infrastructure is within the province. There has been a lot of land-based aquaculture in the province historically. Some facilities are over 100 years old. Some of those being our provincial hatcheries as well. So this isn't a new venture that is just being looked into by industry. I'd say the scale is what is sort of new, and how large some of these facilities are becoming. But again, a lot is known about what impacts and inputs and technology are required to really monitor the industry, and it's continually changing. Facilities range. So this is just a number of facilities that I've been in. They're not from Nova Scotia, but this is just to show you the different types of setups that there can be, from internal to in buildings to outside of buildings. Again, also in our cases, we have pond systems that are used for culturing organisms within the province, and that's all land-based aquaculture. And it just gives you an idea into what can occur at these types of operations. So I'll move into the regulatory framework for aquaculture in Nova Scotia. So we're governed by the Fisheries and Coastal Resources Act. That's the act that oversees aquaculture in Nova Scotia and is supported by the aquaculture license and lease regulations, the aquaculture management regulations, and compliance is conducted by the Nova Scotia Environment and Climate Change and their enforcement division. So my screen has everyone on it here. I'm just gonna, there we go. So the license and lease regulations, I sort of summarize those on the right there. They look at the types of licenses and leases. It describes the processes for adjudicative applications for terms and conditions of licenses, for aquaculture development areas, for performance reviews, fees. It covers a lot of processes and conditions that are required from the administrative perspective when it comes to issuing licenses from within the marine environment or on land. Then you move into the aquaculture management regulations, and those are the regulations which focus on, we'll say, the farm themselves and what is occurring there and how aquaculture is conducted. So that includes farm management plans, which I'll discuss here in a bit, aquaculture management areas, managing of aquatic animal health, environmental monitoring, and containment management. And then also, like I said, enforcement is conducted by Nova Scotia Environment. That's was as a result of all compliance was moved from all different sections of government into one body. So at one point, the Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture did have compliance within our umbrella. So I would have had another bucket there, essentially, where under the Aquaculture Division, where there would have been compliance and enforcement. That's now removed and sits with Nova Scotia Environment. So I'm going to outline the process for which land-based aquaculture applications are assessed and what goes into that from the department's perspective, and how that leads to either a decision on approving an aquaculture lease or rejecting one. So there are two streams for which licenses and leases are issued within the province, and they're different. One is on the right, that's adjudicated decisions. So that's for new marine sites, amendments to add species to a marine site that is not currently approved for finfish to be produced on that site. So say a shellfish site and you want to turn that into a finfish site, that goes through the adjudicative process. And for boundary amendments to expand existing sites, and that's also for marine sites. And that's to a third-party adjudicative review board. And that is a bit of a different process. There are similarities, but that is a three-person panel that is arm's length from the government, and they're an independent review board, similar to like a utilities review board, we'll say. And they get the information from the department, the application, our review, they get the information, the application from the applicants, as well as any interveners that want to be a party to that hearing. But then we have administrative decisions. That's a different process. That's what land-based falls under, and I'll speak to that one today. That also encompasses renewals of current licenses and leases, assignments, that's the sale of a license or a lease from one operator to another, amendments, but that's amendments to either gear types or species going on to your license, boundary amendments, but that is no size increase, marine experimental sites, land-based experimental sites, or amalgamation, institutional, or the reallocation of sites. All have different implications and processes associated with them. Some similar, some not. It depends on what essentially you're doing. But specifically for land-based, I'll get to the process in a second, but essentially there are four factors that the department considers when making decisions on a land-based application. So this is a key piece. One of the differences between an adjudicative review board decision, where there are 8 factors to be considered in that process, but for land-based, there are the 4 factors that have to be considered are as I've outlined here. And these are directly in the aquaculture licenses and lease regulations under section 43. So that's the financial viability of the proponent and the proposed operation, the extent to which the proposal is in accordance with the act, the relevant regulations. So, the licensing leasing regulations, aquaculture management regulations, any guidelines and policies that are established by the minister, also the technical viability of the proposed operation, and any factors that the administrator considers relevant to the application. So these are essentially high-level factors that they branch out, and as you can see, like in section B, that one goes into our different programs from our different sections, from aquatic animal health and our fish health surveillance program to environmental monitoring or containment management, or the technical viability of a farm itself and its farm operation. And essentially any other factors, like I said, if you look at the regulation, that includes, networking with the various other government agencies and getting their advice on what implications that farm may have to their mandates and regulations, as well as any stakeholders that the administrator feels should be engaged as you move through the process. So here's a high-level look at the process. All have intricate steps, no set timelines associated with them, and that's because it is an iterative process. As a question may be raised, it has to be addressed, and it doesn't make it to a final decision until all that is taken into consideration. So you starts off with a pre-application meeting. So that's essentially an introduction from an applicant to the department. People need to understand what the process is, similar to how I'm describing it to you today. You have to know what you have to do to navigate that process, who you have to talk to, what you have to collect for information. You need to know what documents you need to refer to in order to provide the information that is needed to complete a full review by our department and all the other government agencies who review it as well and provide advice to us. So we had that pre-application meeting. It's an introduction with an applicant and the department. Then from there, you have an information collection period. That period can range. That it depends on the nature of the application, how far someone is along in the collection of the pertinent information they need for a land-based application, because it is complicated. There's a lot of moving parts to a land-based operation and that business. Lots of business implications. I'm not a businessman, but when you see what is required to run an operation, it is quite onerous, and you need to make sure you're collecting all the information you need to make sure you could have a successful business in the end. But that information feeds into the regulatory process, which I can speak to, and essentially is the information there that the department requires in order to make an informed decision. So that information collected is, biophysical, it's technical, social, economic. That's all information that the department looks at and requires, because that's information we need to ensure that our regulatory programs and policies are being met, as well as those of other government agencies who may be impacted by an operation. So during that phase, information is collected, it's submitted to the department. The department then begins its review. That review is led by one of my aquaculture advisors and a representative from each of the other groups within the department. So from licensing and leasing, from farm operations, from aquatic animal health. We look at that information. At the same time, that application is also sent off to network agencies. And I'll get into the network agencies in a second, because there is a lot of them and they all have varying mandates and regulations. So that's sent off to them. We do essentially a high level look at an application. Is the information there at a minimum to begin a review? But that's, when I say that is a development plan there, which is essentially in the application. Have they attached their associated fees and everything like that? Are there any major flags of information that we've been missing that we need, or we know another government agency needs that isn't there, has been collected, or has been overlooked? Then there's back and forth with the applicant at that point. They need to go get that information. So we'll send it off to network. They start to review the application as well. They provide advice back to the department. At this point, we also consult with First Nations. The province has a duty to consultations as per the terms of reference between the province and the Mi'kmaq of Nova Scotia. We have that duty, and we pursue that with the Mi'kmaq. They look at these applications as well, and we go through that process with them at the same time. So during that review, we look at the varying advice that's coming into the department. We look at it from our programs, perspectives, and points of view to determine, is all the information there that we need to have an informed review? What does that review look like or result in? And what kind of information do we need to either further collect, or is there enough there that we can advise and make a recommendation to the administrator who would make a final decision on the application? At that point, also, we do have a 30-day public comment period, and that's where any stakeholder can provide comment to the department. That information is brought into the review as well. And you look at what comments are being provided, what information, and then it's looked at against all the information that we have associated with our programs, as well as the advice from the other government agencies who have maybe the responsibility for that a question or concern that may be brought forward. So that's where essentially the public feed into the process as well. All that information is then compiled and provided to the administrator, and they make the final decision on if to approve the land-based facility or I guess the land-based license to operate within a facility or not. So I did talk about the different government agencies who then are involved in this review process, and it is quite onerous. I've updated the names as I was looking at my slide the other day, and with the change of government, the government department names changed to a certain degree for some. So you have Nova Scotia Natural Resources and Renewables. It's hard to actually outline how many acts and regulations are incorporated into these types of reviews, but if you look at the different mandates and acts of each government body, that they are significant. So they look at wildlife. I've sort of summarized what aspects that these groups will cover, but that's what for resources and renewable, that's wildlife, crown lands, and parks. Actually, energy and mines now falls under natural resources and renewables now as well. So we also get, they cover the energy sector, so that they would look at it from the perspective of, is going to impact, say, a tidal turbine or something like that if you're going into the marine environment, or other energy sources like wind farms or something. If someone's developing in that area, they're going to look at that aspect of it. These government agencies look at it from their legislative perspective and provide advice to the department on their concerns. We have back and forth with them on what the concerns are. Sometimes that needs to be clarified. Sometimes more information is needed, and then we require the operator to go out and gain that information to provide back to that government agency, because we rely on their expert advice for some of this information. Like, we're experts on aquaculture. We're not experts on, essentially looking at agriculture, livestock, or crops, or that kind of farming. Different type of farming, but there are similarities. But they look at it from those different perspectives. If you look at public works, like there's implications for which the corporate support services that the province administers. So that's roads and whatnot. And they look at it from those types of perspectives and what the implications are there. We have Nova Scotia Environment and Climate Change. They look at it from protected lands, also from a compliance and enforcement lens. There's communities, cultures, tourism, and heritage. They look at it from archaeological interests. That includes, historical, I guess, aspects of varying types, from First Nations perspectives to, I guess, a mariner's perspective, or a naval perspective, we'll say. You also have municipal affairs. That's notification related to municipal interests. We have the Office of Lanu Affairs. That essentially, that's the body that provides advice from an Aboriginal and intergovernmental relations perspective to the department. And then you branch into the federal side. So that includes Fisheries and Oceans Canada. And they look at it from their different acts and regulations. And that's essentially to ensure there's a reasonable impact or minimal impact on fish and fish habitat, species at risk. They also look at it from the varying shellfish classification perspectives from one program they administer, which is the Canadian Shellfish Sanitation Program. There's Transport Canada that looks at it from a navigation perspective. So in this case, that's the pipes going out into the water from a land-based facility. And that's looking at, they have a whole other process that they follow when it comes to different types of works. What are those works? And there's implications that it has for their programs and their networks, because all these government agencies may have different programs as well, specific to a land-based application. And that's where it does become quite complicated, because when Transport Canada will say looks at something, they would network similar to like we are doing now. So it can get looked at multiple times by multiple different government agencies. Canadian Food Inspection Agency also reviews has a mandate to review applications from a food safety, disease management, shellfish classification as well. And Environment and Climate Change Canada also looks at the applications from varying perspectives specific to their mandate. Migratory wildlife, shellfish classifications, water quality monitoring, etc. So it is quite onerous. It can take a significant amount of time. The department, we have no legislative mandate or have no authority over any one of these government agencies to, hold them to a specific timeline to get information back to us that, to try and expedite a process. They all have their own mandates that they're covering. They review these, they do thorough reviews. Each government agency has a number of different sections, just like our department does, and some more. Like when you consider Fisheries and Oceans Canada, they're a huge body with a lot of expertise internally that we rely on in their advice back to us on how these operations can have an impact on, say, fish and fish habitat, or if it is reasonable for this type of operation to occur in a specific area. And as you can see, I guess when I talked about the different types of land-based operations, they occur in freshwater, on near lakes, near rivers, near marine environments, in city centers. We have facilities that are not close to any type of operation. They draw from groundwater, right? Or municipal sources. So all gets quite complicated and complex pretty quickly. And it depends on the type of operation. So those are all different aspects that, you have to look at, and it depends on the application. So land-based aquaculture is quite interesting because it can vary significantly across the spectrum. So I guess that just going back up to the process itself, once we've gotten all the advice provided by the government agencies, all comments are looked at and addressed by the department. Through that period, there's a lot of back and forth and triaging of the information. Is more information needed that it has to be collected? Is a question asked that then they need to be answered, and there's varying ways that can be done. So then all that information is collected. Once it's to be deemed by the department to be complete, then that's provided to the administrator who makes the final decision on to approve a license or not. And you can see some of those decisions. I'll show you a link here in a bit where those decisions are online, and you can see some of the language associated with those decisions. So I'll get into a bit of the regulation and management of the industry itself. So this would be if you go through the process and your application is approved. So that means you're issued a license from the department. And within that license, licenses are online. You can see the licenses and leases online for the majority of our marine sites and land-based facilities, where some are not there, and that's as we move through the process. We can't do them all at once. That's essentially it is an onerous process, but as they arise, all new ones are on there, and as other ones come up for, say, like a renewal, those then get updated and are present on the website. So that's just occurring over time. We have a process that follows. So as I said, when you're approved for your license, it outlines, the location, species, method of cultivation, and the term of that license. It outlines some specifics around the adherence to our policies, like our farm management plan and our regulations. And it outlines some specifics around reporting requirements, annual fees and whatnot, and ensuring that the adherence to any other protocols, approvals, licenses, or permissions required under municipal, provincial, or federal law. So, in the case that we're talking about here, if you're looking at rezoning to what types of aquaculture could occur in your area, we might look at a license application and approve it to actually be licensed, but it's up to the company to actually determine, that they were actually allowed to operate in the area. So in an area that is zoned, say commercial, we'll say, for aquaculture. There are other provincial or federal permits that are required. Our department's responsible for the licensing of the aquaculture itself. That doesn't mean there aren't other permits required when it comes to these types of the facility itself. Another example, you're building a building for a land-based facility. Well, you need to get building permits, right? That's what sort of covered. That is what is covered under these types of license conditions. So getting into the specifics of how we regulate the industry, it is through farm management plans, which are specific in the regulations. The main sections that form the body of farm management plans is fish health management, environmental management, farm operations, and containment management. And those break out into a significant amount of information. And they reference essentially that they're large documents. It essentially forms the basis of how the farm is going to be operated, what standard operating procedures are, what are required, what the requirements are for that specific farm to be compliant with our regulations. It refers, I also have a link here, it refers to minimum compliance requirements that operators must meet in order to be compliant with the regulations. And the farm management plan has sections. There's also templates online that shows what sections are required and how then operators populate those. And the department approves the implementation of those farm management plans. So it talks about everything from, farm operations, how, and it's essentially every facet of the operation, how you're going to be, storing anything from feed to chemicals to, farm waste. It talks about environmental monitoring. It talks about fish health management, biosecurity, that there are broader implications for all of those, and containment management. It all incorporates, the system itself, what you're doing there, how you're doing it. And then, at this point, a lot of the information through the review process gets incorporated into the farm management plans, because it doesn't only come from the perspective of the department. It also arises from what information is required in there, or monitoring may be required in there, specific to the type of operation. Because as you can see, they range in scale. Like we have, marine plants farms within the province. We have shellfish hatcheries, shellfish nurseries. We have land-based hatcheries. We have land-based grow-out facilities. All vary in scale, in nature, in infrastructure, technology, all very different. And that's why we've implemented this regulatory aspect of for the industry, is because it gives you the oversight into these types of operations, which it's not one size fits all. It's essentially you have to start from scratch on what is the type of facility, and then you get into the specifics of an area, what the science is. It's pretty well known the different types of impacts that aquaculture can have or inputs can have on the environment. But you have to understand what is being cultured and what the system can do or can't do, and what is then being deposited back into the environment. And varying aspects of that are well known and have been studied, and you have to really get into the specifics of an operation through the review process, through the advice from the other government agencies, which brings it to this point where you have standard operating procedures of how you're going to operate your farm to ensure you're not going to have those impacts on fish health in a negative manner on the environment, that the farm operations are going to be conducive to the area, and that you're containing all your essentially product within the confines of your facility, be it a pond, a building, a tank. It does vary. So it's quite complicated, but there's lots of variety and opportunity that makes it an interesting interesting industry to be involved in. So again, that's sort of a high level look at the industry itself and how it starts from start to finish. Here, these are a number of resources I would encourage you to go to look at. Mainly stems from our website, which is novascotia.ca/fish. And then you get into the different buckets of our marine sites, our marine section, our inland section, and the aquaculture section. There's a number of informative videos in the aquaculture section as well that talk about the regulations, environmental monitoring, food security, also the administrative process, which I've outlined here to you today. There's a video there that you can also refer to. There's links to the farm management plan templates and the minimum compliance requirements. Essentially, a link to the public information, the decisions that have been made on land-based operations as of late, as well as the license and lease documents associated with those, and other marine sites. So it's a significant amount of information that is out there, and I think you guys are doing a great job at trying to gain the information and trying to get educated in aquaculture, because it is quite an interesting industry, and it's quite complex, and hopefully this has given you a bit of insight into the industry itself, and I can try and answer your questions as they come up.
Okay, thank you very much. That's excellent presentation with lots of information. Perhaps if we could de-share the screen, I'll begin to recognize members of PAC and staff for questions. Thank you.
Sure.
Do we have questions from the floor? Again, just ask the questions with the hand, please. Oh, we've got one. Member Camo.
I guess everyone else is shy or else getting tired for the day. So a lot of information in there. Just wondering, you talked about a number of different areas where there's consideration for approving the application of the license. I'm just wondering about enforcement after the fact. Whether or not you have staff that go around, or whether the Department of Environment has staff that go around to sites to make sure things are being done the way they were supposed to be done, and to look at any impact on the local environment.
Yeah, so I guess one piece that I might have missed there. So when in the process, so you have an approval. So an operator can't start operating a site until they have an approved farm management plan in place. So they can't put any product in the water. So for a land-based site, our staff would go to the site. They're going to go over the farm management plan with the operator, looking at the various aspects of the system as it relates to the different pieces within the farm management plan. So from the infrastructure perspective, from a containment perspective, so how they said that like the design from start that was proposed, then you're going through a build, things can change when you're building facilities, right? But again, that's where we have to go look at that. Are the screens in place? Is the system designed as it was approved, essentially, right? That's just the first aspect. Then the different programs within the department have different sections, I guess, there are different programs from aquatic animal health. So we have veterinarians that visit the site on a scheduled basis, but that schedule, it can also be deviated from if a clinical issue comes up from an animal health perspective. We have our farm operations group, so they conduct audits on sites. They can audit an entire farm management plan. So that's all the different records required within a farm management plan. They can do it on a specific aspect of a farm management plan. And as well as then that's just from the department's perspective, that they're meeting our regulatory requirements as we see in the program. But then that leads into the environment side and the compliance aspect of that. So if we see that there is an issue with an associated farm and they're not meeting the regulatory aspects of our farm management plans and our regulations, that's then referred to environment, and that's where the compliance aspect really kicks in. That's where they enforce on the regulations and have that ability. That ranges from essentially SOTs. You can attribute that to speeding tickets or fines. But that can also then lead to prosecution in a court of law, right? That can lead essentially to the extreme, I believe, would be like essentially the cancellation of a license. So there's quite a bit of regulatory oversight from the province perspectives, and it stems from the varying programs, how those then monitor to ensure they're meeting the regulatory requirements, and then that elevates. So there's different levels, and it elevates up to the enforcement side of things, which is through Nova Scotia Environment and Climate Change.
And I'll just add to that too, Nathaniel, there is of course the independence of Nova Scotia Environment and Climate Change to be able to go onto the sites to assess for compliance themselves. So that's certainly a part of the compliance model, but also there is there's a public complaint line that goes directly to Nova Scotia Environment. So complaints that are, related to any existing sites can certainly go to Nova Scotia Environment and Climate Change, and then they themselves, through their own compliance and enforcement, can conduct inspections or investigations and compliance activities on the aquaculture farm.
Yeah, I guess one aspect, so that when you get into land-based, so the storage of hazardous materials, like it might not be specific to feeding fish, but you're running pumps and equipment, and you have, say, well, you're heating a facility and using oil. There's regulations that are completely separate from this that are enforced by environment. They enforce other aspects of other people's regulations that may be as a result of a farming operation when it comes to land-based, right? So it's complex.
Thank you. Councillor Durkee, you have a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Nathaniel. My question to you is that at the very beginning of your presentation, you showed the different formats and ways that aquaculture was happening in Nova Scotia. And it looked like there are flow through. And what I want to know is there anything, I'm sure you've seen the proposal that we've received from a certain organization, and I'm just wondering if that style has been happening in Nova Scotia, where there is a flow through system and it's flowing back into the ocean. And I just want to know if that's one of the scenarios happening in Nova Scotia yet?
Yeah, so in the slides, I did show that there are different types from flow through to RAS, recirculating aquaculture systems, to hybrids, to U-fish as well. And we do have all aspects of those types of facilities within the province.
Okay, and so therefore my next question would be, in the system where it's flowing into the ocean, have there been any environmental issues or effects on other types of fishing?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, thank you.
And our planner, Ms. Robertson.
I have a few questions.
Sure.
And I have gone through the lease agreements that are on your website that are made public. But I honestly had trouble with the way that they're sorted and finding any that I considered comparable to kind of the situation that we're considering here in Yarmouth. So I was wondering if it was possible for you to provide us, since they are public information, with an example of an approved finfish land-based farm license that's similar to what's being proposed in our area, so we can look at some of the licensing requirements that you might include in those kind of documents, or even if you had some examples of what kind of requirements you would have within the license for something that's similar. Because I respect that it's like that this is such a diverse industry and that there's a lot going on and that you're looking at each site individually, but it's really hard from a high level perspective when we're considering if it should be permitted here, you know, what the follow through from your department will be, and what kind of regulations you'll actually require from them, because we're kind of before you.
So I guess, you know, like you touched on the piece that is really, I guess, the crux of it, that they're all unique in their situation. So it's really hard to try to compare one facility to another. They may be similar in the infrastructure you're using, but then you have to get into the environment in which you're placing it, right? So that could lead to different conditions. Again, some may not have conditions, because you have to look at the different aspects of the facility. You have to look at the marine environment, the freshwater environment, the receiving body of water that you know, the site will be either discharging it. It might be in a municipal wastewater treatment facility. And then you're getting into other requirements that I'm sure you're aware of, all the requirements for your facility and what can go into that. So you could use that as an example. Then if someone wanted to put that into your wastewater facility, what are those essentially would be the types of conditions you would also apply to, you know, our license conditions. It really does depend on the advice we get back from, you know, our network agencies in some respects, and that's to determine, you know, what kind of monitoring is required for that area. Is it required or is it not? And what are you monitoring? Because it really, there may be no risk. There may be a risk, but it really does depend on the facility itself, the location. You can see that
like, give specific examples, like just like if you know, there's concerns about and I know we're getting into a specific application, but these are concerns that we brought up, so we can talk about it from a general. But there's a wetland site that's particularly concerning, and this would go through Department of Environment. We understand that if there was an aquaculture facility set up next to it. But when it comes to the actual licensing process, is it within your ability to say, in the licensing agreement, you know, so it's written there strongly, there will absolutely be no outflow going within that wetland environment? Is that kind of the kind of things that you put in a licensing agreement, or is that something that goes into the management plan, or is that something that you address at all when there's specific site concerns?
Yeah, you would look at all those aspects, and, you know, if you're talking, did they say they wanted to discharge into a wetland? Well, we would look at that, and then we would look at, is that allowed from the Department of Environment's perspective? They would provide the advice to us. If that's not achievable from a legislative perspective, then then you wouldn't even make it to a decision, really, right? It just wouldn't be allowed. So those are all the aspects
in the licensing agreement. Like, would you write something related to that in the actual licensing agreement, or would that go into the management plan? Like, I know it's a consideration, but when you're going through the consideration and when you come to a conclusion, how does that get put into the final documents that they're required to adhere to?
You probably could put something. It's hard to sort of speculate, I guess, what like a situation like. That's why I can't give you a specific example, because you're getting into the specifics of an individual operation, which I'm not allowed to actually provide, right?
Okay, so that's what I was asking, because the license are supposed to be public.
They are, and they are. That's right.
In those agreements, like, could you show us an agreement where there was specific site concerns that were addressed within the licensing agreement? Like,
I guess I can point you to the land-based licenses online, and then you can look through the different licenses and to determine, and they're there to determine what those conditions would be, right?
And
like,
if they aren't there, I think, sorry, Nathaniel, I was going to say, if they aren't there, we can certainly look through for examples of terms and conditions to what you're asking, to see if there are examples to show you that. What I would say to Nathaniel's point is, to your example of a wetland that is under Nova Scotia Environment and Climate Change, and if they came back to us with significant concerns about discharge into a wetland, and they would not permit it or would not recommend that happen, to Nathaniel's point, it wouldn't make it to the licensing decision, so there would be no license to put it in, right? If it was a hard stop.
Even if the public or the municipality expressed concerns, and that would be from a comfort perspective more than anything, to write something like that in a license. It's not something you would do unless it was.
Well, you don't. I know usually,
I'm asking hard questions, but it's like, that's the kind of what the questions we're getting from the public, right?
But you don't usually write someone else's legislative requirements into a license. Like, they're not allowed to do that. Like, I'm not gonna. Like, we wouldn't, I guess, write that into a condition of license, because it's illegal. We just aren't going to reiterate that again, right? Because you're breaking the law, and there are processes for which that people are prosecuted for breaking the law, right? Like,
but so to your point, there is the 30-day public comment period where members of the public or any other stakeholder can provide input into the process. So if there are questions raised and there are concerns, then the department has the ability to go back to the relevant regulatory agency, if it's not ourselves, to say, okay, we've had this issue raised. Can you comment on it? Can you tell us if it's within the scope of your regulatory environment? Is it an issue from you? So it is definitely addressed and responded to. So there is a mechanism certainly for comments from the public and questions from the public to be part of the application decision.
Is the municipality permitted to partake in that? We've received a lot of public. I'm the municipal planner, so I'm handling all these feedbacks, and I've got our municipal policy, but I don't have your policy answers. So I've got a lot of questions that I can't answer. So if as part of that public day process, could the municipality submit questions that they've received or feedback about concerns, so that that's on the record for your process?
Absolutely, the municipality is welcome to do it, and I would also extend the offer to have as many conversations to answer any questions we can with the municipality, similar to what we're doing here today. So welcome to share as much information about our regulatory framework as we can. But in terms of the process that Nathaniel presented on earlier, you absolutely can submit comment through the public day or the 30-day public window, through that official process.
Okay.
Yeah, and you're also directly incorporated into the network process, right, where we do notify you of the application, right, and then can provide comment on that as well. But I'd say that's more from I would say from a municipal perspective, more so than the public's perspective.
Okay, I might have more questions after.
Oh, sure. No.
Thank you for answering, because I'm getting these questions and it's hard for me to answer them, right? Thank you.
Thank you. And the chair recognizes Mr. Warner. Mr. Camo, sorry.
Thank you. Just a bit of a follow-up from what Patty was talking about. I've got a good understanding on what an open flow land-based system is and a good understanding of what the recirculating agricultural systems are for land-based. I'm just wondering if you could give us some enlightenment on what you feel a hybrid system is for land-based.
Well, hybrid systems can vary. It depends on the overall setup of the facility. Is it all tied in to one section or not? Obviously you have your water going in and it goes out. Then it goes into your filtration systems. And that once it goes through that, parts of that will be recirculated into the inflow again, right? That has to go through varying processes before it goes back into the water. Part of it being solids removal and whatnot. There's varying streams that occur from a land-based facility, right? That they go to different spots. From a hybrid system, essentially, you're taking a portion of the water that's already going through your system. It's being filtered and put back into the system. So you're topping up or offsetting what is currently coming in. There'll be a formula around that, but essentially that's what I would refer to a hybrid system as being. And then when it varies depending on the varying streams of what the outputs of those streams, be it going back to the fish, we'll say, or shellfish, going out to the if it's a freshwater system, lake, river, or marine environment, what's occurring there, that's the effluent outflow. And then you have another one where it could go to a treatment section where that's then being used for other purposes outside of the operation itself. But when I refer to a hybrid, I would say it's the recycling of that water that's going back from the end of the fish tanks when it's gone through the system, going back into the start again.
Thank you. Additional questions from
Thank
PAC
you.
members, or you have a follow-up, Mr. Mo?
Yeah, it's sort of along lines, and this may be outside of your area of expertise, but I would suspect that your department speaks regularly with other agriculture departments or fisheries oceans departments in the rest of Canada, BC in particular, and probably within the rest of the world as to trends in agriculture, land-based and open pen. And I'm just wondering if you guys are aware of what direction regulators around the world are going with regulations for land-based agriculture.
Yeah, so I guess we've essentially, I would say, cherry-picked various regulatory aspects of programs from around the world. We went through our regulatory overhaul started in I believe it was 2013, 14 with the independent review by Dole Leahy. That led to a number of recommendations. And then from there, essentially took varying programs and aspects of programs from around the world and incorporated those into our regulations. So, essentially there's a big push for land-based aquaculture right now. A lot of out west, they're transitioning from marine to the land-based facilities. That's under the authority of the federal government. In Maine, they're expanding their industry currently right now, both on land-based and the marine environment. In other jurisdictions, they're currently expanding both as the provinces in marine and land-based types of farming of varying nature. And that's all to essentially support, what I guess the food security in the end for the world, and especially in Nova Scotia. That's what a major thing that we are focused on. So I think all aspects. It's one of the interesting parts of aquaculture is how diverse and how much technology is increasing and ever changing every day for all types. So it's quite interesting to see.
would add to that, to Nathaniel's point, you know, it is a growing industry, and there's lots of growing interest in land-based aquaculture in Nova Scotia and around the world, right? And the beauty of our modern framework and the regulation we have in Nova Scotia is our commitment to continuous improvement of it, right? So as the industry itself evolves and technology evolves, you know, we're committed to continuously, you know, looking at our regulations and our policies as they apply, and shifting and making any changes as necessary.
Thank you. And Councilor Hilton, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question. When they go through the licensing process, we heard from previous presenters the effects that it had on say other industries like rockweed and possibly lobster and shellfish. How can you give any insight on how they, you know, what that looks like when they license a specific farm, how they look at the other industries around the area, and what the possible effects might be and how they might monitor that?
Sure. So when you make an application, you're required to collect a significant amount of information. What I would reference would be like the baseline information. So what is currently in the area I guess, in question here, right? So you're looking at it from the intake perspective and the outtake perspective. If you're looking at it from a land-based facility that's drawing from wells, as an example, there's processes through Nova Scotia Environment that you have to then start doing pump tests on those wells. How much water are you going to draw? They have different thresholds for those types of facilities. And are you going to have an impact on that aquifer, essentially supplying the rest of the area around that facility? You know, you're doing that similar for, it's a different mechanism, but you're looking at it from a river perspective. So you have to assess that whole, you know, essentially like the watershed. What are those, what is the water supply? If you're going to draw from that, what's the impacts on that system itself? And then you have essentially the back end as well, right? So you have to look at the infrastructure and what is essentially going out there. But I guess tying it back to the baseline, you know, you have to do essentially a biodiversity survey of the area. What's there? What are the impacts? Because you do know what essentially is coming out of these types of facilities. You know, you have the organics, you have therapeutants, you have drugs, all which are heavily regulated by the varying acts associated with aquaculture. You know, DFO has the aquaculture activities regulations that talks about authorizing drugs and pesticides. You know, drugs and pesticides aren't authorized. They're done through, they're approved by Health Canada. They're approved and they have to be prescribed by veterinarians, essentially, right? It's not, you can't just go out and buy the stuff off the shelf and use them in your facility. All those have been studied to determine what is the impacts on the marine environment and the areas there, I guess the organisms that are there. And that's where we do rely on the advice from Fisheries and Oceans, because we'll get information from an applicant. We collect it ourselves. They also have information on an area and what's there. And they also require information to support models. You then look at those models and determine, are you going to overload an ecosystem, you know, with the nitrogen, phosphorus, organics, you know, I guess the aquaculture activity regulations refer to biological oxygen demanding matter, right? That's essentially organics going out into the water. Essentially, organisms break those organics down. If you put too much into that system, you overload it, and the system can crash. You can also there's also a spot where, you know, depending on the receiving body, that can stimulate the biodiversity of an area. So those are all aspects that we look at. You look at, you know, in the marine environment, they're starting to look at co-culture of different species around sites like rockweed. Like I manage the harvesting of rockweed within the province. Like that area is essentially leased for rockweeding. we look at these aspects to make sure we're not going to have an impact on those industries. There's clam flats not far from this area, some which are leased by companies in the province that we've looked at those aspects. So we take all aspects of the biodiversity of an area into consideration, the advice provided, you know, if there's concerns brought forward, say by lobster fishers about lobster. Well, we'll look at that. We'll look at the literature. We'll look at the advice from Fisheries and Oceans Canada. They're the ones that have the authority on and to maintain the fisheries resources within areas, and they aren't going to allow something to occur that's gonna have unreasonable impacts on that species. So a lot of it is taken into consideration from that review. If it's determined monitoring has to happen, like that's then I guess what Caroline was looking at, like what types of conditions need to be put in there, and if there's specifics ones that are unique, like that's where those conditions occur. But you know, we that's where we wouldn't write in, you know, you have to have a veterinarian prescribe an antibiotic for a system. That's already set out in multiple different areas of legislation that you know, they have to abide by. So I don't know if that answers all your question or not, but
that's good. Just one follow up. You talked about the amount of water that you could use from a well, say. Is there limits on the amount you can draw from the ocean? And if not, why? Like, because the proposed farm uses a massive amount of water. Just wondering, there's limits to that.
There's no, not to my knowledge, there's no set limits. You know, I guess I don't exactly know why. That's probably a pretty big provincial, federal question, really, that I'm not sure who would actually look at that. But like, essentially, you know, everyone would be looking at why you're drawing that water, and is it going to have an impact on the resource associated with the amount of that water removal, right? So for the example of the wells, you know, you don't want them to have an impact on the neighbors and their wells run dry, right? So that's why environment would have that practice. They have that process and assessment in place. Another example, I guess, would be from if you're drawing from a municipal system, you have to understand how much you're going to use, and then I'm assuming get approval from the municipal body to use that amount of water, which I'm sure your planners or engineers or whatnot have an idea of how much water can actually be distributed throughout your system. And if they're above that, then, you know, they have to lower that. So that would be a condition for their license, right? And then into the marine environments, well, you're looking at what impact is that going to have on the area you're drawing from. And, you know, it's complicated and can be complex, but depends on, you have to start breaking it down as to what are we concerned with there, right? And is it a specific species that is present there? Is it a nursery area? It depends on the question, and then from that you have to look at it. Is it a risk or not? And that's where we rely on our internal expertise as well as the varying government agencies like Fisheries and Oceans to determine if that withdrawal is going to have essentially a negative impact, and then we have to determine can it be mitigated or not, and if not, then it's not going to result in a favorable application, right? I can only speculate on that. I'm not the decision maker.
My apologies, I was muted. C.O. Brooks.
Mr. Chair, and thank you, Carla and Nathaniel. So you talked about the process that the province of Nova Scotia went through to kind of modernize the framework and take on this approach of continuous improvement. So as the science develops and the innovation develops, I think what I heard you say was the idea is that the framework will be nimble and be able to respond to that. So there's a term that I'm used to hearing that I think maybe now maybe obsolete, I'm not sure. So in the spring, I see lots of trucks going by to stock the lakes, and everybody says, you know, oh, that's the fish from the fish hatchery. So talk to me a little bit about the term fish hatchery and how that applies to modern aquaculture.
Yeah, so I guess we've got the various fish hatcheries around the province from a provincial perspective. And then we have some commercial ones. So what we have would be, you have what I would term, you have a hatchery, but they're not necessarily within the province hatching eggs. So in the essential sense of a hatchery, you have brood stock there, you're spawning the fish, which means, fertilizing eggs with sperm and then growing them up, hatching them out, and then shipping them out to either a marine site or a marine site for grow out. Most of the facilities in Nova Scotia, they would either get eggs from, so in the sense of trout, you get eggs from a hatchery, we'll say. They're shipped to you and you grow them up. That's what the province does. I can speak in the specifics to the province, and we get eggs to our provincial fish hatchery. They do hatch out, but we don't do that spawning aspect of it, I guess, crossing the eggs with the sperm from the brood stock. But we get the eggs, you hatch them, and then you ship them out. The other areas, you can get small fish, so fry or par. So after they hatch in a hatchery, then they grow them up to a certain stage. That's where then they'll bring them over to essentially a site and to one of these hatcheries. I would term it more of a nursery. It just gets into the lingo and what it's really hard to actually define from one aspect to another. Depends on the life stages and really if you're hatching them versus, I guess, nursing them up to a larger size for when they're shipped out. Usually a lot of people term a hatchery just when they're growing juvenile fish and then they're going out to the marine environment or stocking lakes and rivers and whatnot, right? So, I guess, it depends on really the nature of that facility itself.
So just one follow-up, Nathaniel, then. So do fish hatcheries fall under the same regulatory framework, or is there a separate framework?
It falls under the same framework. Okay. It's land-based. We have eels being cultured within the province. We have shellfish being cultured within the province. We have shellfish nurseries in the province. You're essentially, where they collect spat from the wild, seed, young fish, young shellfish, bring them into that nursery, hold them, grow them up a bit, they sort them, and then they send them back out. That's where I would consider it a nursery. It all falls under land-based aquaculture. Like we've got aquaponics operations occurring within the province. That's land-based aquaculture. We don't really get into the specifics of if it's, flow through, hybrid, RAS. That's all assessed within the process. And, we know what types of facilities we're looking at and the implications of each. But when we license it, it's a land-based facility, and then it gets down into the specifics as you get into the intricacies of that individual operation.
Right. Thank you. And I don't see any other hands, so I'll take an opportunity to ask a question. So I'm assuming that those fish hatcheries would be either hybrid or they would be flow through to an extent. And currently, we have our municipal planning strategy and land use bylaws prohibit anything but a totally closed system. So at this juncture, is my understanding correct that the municipality couldn't entertain a fish hatchery in its jurisdiction?
I guess if that's it depends on your interpretation of closed. What is it? What was the language again? Closed flow?
Closed system.
Closed contained.
Closed contained.
Closed contained system. Well, again, it all comes down to how, I guess, you want to interpret that, right? Is a man-made pond a closed contained system that you're controlling the amount of water going into it and the amount of water going out of it? like I think you could term it that way. Like our provincial hatcheries, I can speak to those. There's an article recently where we're looking at turning those into into a recirculating aquaculture system, essentially from a flow through system. That's because of the implications of water availability for that system. So it's the nature of the area, right? Really, you got to look at the resources you have available and determine, what that means and what can be done within at an area. And that's why land-based is so unique, right? So it does come down to your interpretation of a land-based facility, like a nursery, an oyster nursery. Usually it's just it's a flow through system that you have water going in and it's being filtered, and then the water's going back out. It's being filtered by the shellfish themselves, right? And then it's going back out. Really, you got to consider what can be done in the area, and a lot can be with different types of technology, right? So
what I'm hearing you say, just to clarify in my mind, is that really any aquaculture project that comes to us, any proponent, no matter if it's freshwater, whether it's saltwater, marine, and of course we're talking specifically about on land applications. Really it's dependent on the circumstances of the proposal, species, location in terms of depth of water and all those types of things that you'd look into. But again, it's sort of a site specific, project specific criteria that you'd look at. That's what you're sort of saying, sort of a reasonable way to look at it, to both protect the environment on one hand and balance that off with economic activity and social activity and growth and all those other things. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think you summed it up quite well there. Like different facilities have different risks, right? How they're operated and monitored, and those risks can be mitigated in different ways. Sometimes the risks, people do look for the worst case scenario, but it may not even be there. That goes into the upfront assessment of the area, right? When you get into the language around your policies on, I guess, for your strategies or whatnot, that people will interpret language differently, right? People interpret our regulations differently than I may, and then if it's determined, usually if it's a significant issue that would end up in a court of law, and there's an interpretation by lawyers and judges and stuff like that, right? People will interpret information and language a lot differently to suit their needs, right? So how you interpret your language for closed, contained, or whatever it was, again, I'd have to look at it and whatnot. Right. But again, that would just be my interpretation of it from my perspective, versus I bet everyone else could have a different perspective on here and interpret it a bit differently, right? So it's definitely a challenge.
I'm not going to respond, but I'll make a comment. I guess any legislation is, the better it is, the clearer it is. So I think we've got some work to do on our land use bylaw and our municipal planning strategy. There is some contention in regard to what the closed system means. I've heard varying interpretations. So in the event, that's thank you for the answers to my questions. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. And that's why, we look at it from a land-based perspective, right? And I won't get into any more interpretation from my perspective, but I think if you're influencing intake and outflow, that's a closed system to me, right? You're controlling it, but I'll let you guys sort through that from your perspective.
Thank you. Recognize Mr. Kamal.
Thank you. Just a quick question. I'm wondering about lobster holding facilities, whether they fall under your jurisdiction or whose jurisdiction they fall under, because they tend to have some impact, or not necessarily some impact, but they do draw seawater in and release seawater out. So I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
That they don't fall under aquaculture's jurisdiction. I'll just say that. They do withdraw water, and I think there's the federal government has some implications there on what can and can't be done at that type of a facility, as well as from a provincial perspective. Our licensing side does on the marine side have some implications, but I think it depends on the type of facility. Again, if it's a pound versus a holding versus, again, that is outside my purview really at this point, but it's a good question.
Thank you. Additional questions from PAC or staff? Yeah, Carolyn, did you have one?
Maybe just one more, if that's okay.
Okay,
go ahead. No, that's fine.
I'm just going to go back because Nick kind of asked this question already, but I just wanted to make sure I was kind of clear on it. So he went through that very in-depth list of all the different departments that get involved and weigh in when it comes to applications. But I was wondering specifically when it comes, because we're a fishing industry, a fishing community, when it comes to the fishing industry, is that your department that looks at anticipating and protecting and monitoring the industry, or does that go to DFO? I guess it's my first question on that.
It's specifically DFO is responsible for the protection of fish habitat, and SARA listed species under the Fisheries Act. We work closely with them. Like our programs are aligned that, we are the lead authority on the regulation of aquaculture, right? But it's the collection of that information that feeds into what they need in order for them to do their review, which they then provide the advice back to us on what the risks are associated with a specific type of application. I can refer you to like the Aquaculture Review Board. So that's online, and from there you can see that's for an application. There's been some oyster applications that have gone through the third-party review board. There's been the boundary amendment that recently happened last week in Yarmouth around the Digby Fair, Rattling Beach site. On there, if you look at the consultation, it's the report on network consultations, and that shows the back and forth from when an application is networked, so sent to all the government agencies, the back and forth, how concerns are raised, how then they're addressed. So that goes to all the government agencies. They vary between land-based and marine sites for varying purposes, but you'll see a lot of them pretty much are the same. And that's the similar type of process. When I say network, it isn't changed. Like we send it to DFO, they'll respond, and you'll see that there's a significant amount of back and forth, but you'll also see their letter of advice to the department and their scientific review of that marine site application. And, they do an extensive in-depth review, and there's, I don't know how many groups within their department that look at it, right? But it's from varying aspects of it. But I would definitely look at that.
That weighs into the application process and approving the license. And then let's say you did approve and there was some unexpected or unanticipated impact on the fishery, like there was something noticed and thought, okay, how would that be mitigated? Like when they step in, would they stop the aquaculture from operating, or would they have new, like, I guess I'm just wondering what happens if there was an impact.
Well, I guess it depends on the impact and how what it's specifically related to. If it's an impact on the fishery, then how?
What would be considered significant enough then, I guess, that they would? I know it's
in the way I know where you like. I know why you're asking the questions. It's the unknown, but that's the world we live in, is the world of the unknown, right? And you can model things as much as you can, and then determine essentially if is going to be reasonable or not. And if it's not, then we have to link it to, okay, is it because there's too many fish on a site or not? You know, I guess there can be processes put in place that, you know, the province has the authority to implement that requires mitigations to occur. Like if there is an impact and it's directly related to, you know, a legislative issue, then that essentially will be addressed, right? An example I'll use, I guess, is for environmental monitoring for a marine cage site. So, you know, there's specific thresholds around, you know, that sampling takes place, monitoring takes place, and you essentially determine if, and that's related to biomass of an area. And if you're overloading that area, then, you know, mitigations occur, and that can be essentially a reduction of fish being cultured at that site. If you reduce the biomass, you're reducing the organic matter going into that area, and essentially that's one mechanism that the province has the ability to essentially address, right? I guess that's just one example. But essentially you have to make that direct link to what the problem is, right? And that may be challenging, it may not be, right? I don't know. It's hard to really speculate until you run into that. I guess an issue is identified.
I think too, Caroline, just to add on to what Nathaniel is saying, without going into specific examples of what might be, you know, a hard stop, there are definitely, I would say, checks and balances within the regulatory framework where we can stop and assess any compliance information that comes into us. I can't speak to Fisheries and Oceans compliance and what they would do, but certainly within our program, you know, there are opportunities for us to review compliance information. Through our own monitoring, to the earlier question about our site visits, there's certainly an ability for us to do checks and balances and ensure compliance with our regulations.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I see that we're at just slightly past 5 o'clock, which is our time allotment. But if there were another question, I'm not seeing any. Okay, and listen, on behalf of the PAC, I'd like to thank both of you for all the time we've spent and the expert presentation, and certainly the answers to some difficult and questions. And you know, the PAC and staff appreciate your help in helping us learn more about aquaculture and informing our choices moving forward. So again, thank you so much, and perhaps we'll be sending you a number of questions your way as the process unfolds. So thank you.
And thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah,
excellent.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you.
And I'll close. I'll close by saying that we have one more session today. One more presenter, Bernie Berry. He's an industry participant, past president, Coldwater Lobster Association. And Mr. Berry will be joining us at 5:30. It's now 5, so I'll look for a motion to recess until 5:30. Councillor Hilton moves, seconder. Councillor Cushing, all those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? See everybody at 5:30. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.